Hey guys, it's Max. We just got our hands on the OMD E-M1 Mark II. This is a very popular camera. It took us a while to get it, and we're going to be spending probably about the next month testing it out and putting out a full detailed review. Now, one of the first things we wanted to test is the image stabilization. Olympus is known for having really good image stabilization. A lot of people say that it's actually the best compared to other companies. So we have a few other cameras in here. We have an a6500 and we have a G85, which is Panasonic's latest camera that features in-body image stabilization. So it's their latest system. So I want to see how well this works doing handheld as well as doing some walking and then some photographs at the same time. So we're using Sigma lenses, which are one of my favorites, the 18-35 and the 50-100. So the first test is going to be me walking backwards using all three of the cameras. So this lens does not feature image stabilization. We're going to match up the focal lengths, and then inside the camera bodies we put in the equivalent focal lengths to make sure the IBIS is working properly. So we're about to start our first test. I could tell that the IBIS system is working, and it's probably going to be hard to tell on the LCD screen. We'll probably just have to get back to the office and see how well they compare on the computer. Ready, get set, go. Tell me when to stop. Stop. Now I switched over to the G85. Go. Yeah, this looks better. Yeah. All right, now last is the a6500, and with this one, of course, we have to zoom in slightly to account for the crop factor difference of the sensor. Ready? Go. And you tell me when to stop. Now the next test I'm going to do is a handheld video test. As you guys see, I have the 50-100 1.8 Sigma, which is a beast of a lens. I'm going to have it at 100 millimeters, so this is going to be about 150 equivalent, and I'm just going to be doing some handheld. So it's really heavy, so it's kind of hard to keep it stable if you're doing handheld. The other cameras, we're going to have to zoom out slightly to account for the crop factor, but the field of view is going to be roughly about 150 millimeters. So 50-100 right now, handheld. I would never do this without IBIS. 150 full frame equivalent. So we took some time to look at the footage and compare everything, and one thing we realized is the first time we did the tests, and this was after everything was already edited, the video was done, just the Panasonic and the Olympus did much worse overall, and it kind of didn't make sense. And then it finally hit me that I was putting in the full frame equivalent, so about 150 millimeters into the cameras, instead of putting in just the Micro Four Thirds standard lens equivalent and then having the camera do the crop factor, which that makes more sense doing it that way. I mean, the cameras don't specify anything, it just says what's your focal length. But we switched to that. We redid all the tests again, and both cameras did much better this time. And in fact, we went back multiple times to make sure all of our testing is accurate. And so overall, on the video side, taking a look at walking first, the Panasonic and Olympus just killed the Sony. Their footage is much more stable, and this is something where if you need to be hand-holding and walking and tracking a person and recording, this looks way better, and I would actually be fine with using one of these cameras for something like that, whereas the Sony, it's just there's way too much movement and just harsh changes, and it doesn't look good. It's not usable. I would definitely not use a Sony in a situation like this. Personally, I always use a gimbal because that is better than any of the Panasonic or Olympus shots. but the Sony does get taken out, and it's quite embarrassing seeing the difference. Now, one thought I have is because the camera is so small, in fact, it's way smaller than the other two camera systems if you figure everything in, including the thickness. This is a really thin camera. The grip is the worst. Ergonomically, this is the worst camera. And so you have a large lens, and we use the Sigma 18-35, which is much more heavy, maybe twice as heavy as the body. And so you actually see quite a bit of up and down movement in that as well. And it was interesting, when this camera was announced with the IBIS, Sony made it a huge deal that it has IBIS in such a tiny body. Keep in mind that the sensor is twice as large and the camera is smaller overall. So I think that has something to do with how bad it performs. But then on top of it, there's probably things like optimizations and stuff like that. So the Panasonic and Olympus did way better in the walking test. One interesting thing is in the walking test, both cameras showed some kind of warping in the corners, and we made sure that the software stabilization was turned off. Because software stabilization, in my experience, all the cameras that have had it are really bad. You get that warping look, like if you overstabilize footage while you're editing, but the thing is, you can't fix that, you can't adjust it, it's baked into the image, whereas if you have a little bit more shake in the image or a little bit more vibration, stuff like that, you can apply a stabilization filter in post, and then you can fine tune to get the best smoothness and the best image overall. So that's one thing that I would definitely not suggest using. But both of these cameras did show that in the footage, because the IBIS is also moving kind of back to forth. It's 5 axis of stabilization, so that's why you have some of those corners. But with that said, I would much rather have a little bit of that warping, but a much smoother, nicer image than having an image like from the 6500, which is just all over the place. Now, as far as the video at 150 millimeters, they were all closer. I think my favorite is the Olympus footage, and second place would be the GX85, but it was interesting, the G85 actually, I keep calling it GX85. The G85 footage, the image is kind of just floating around all the time, whereas the Olympus and the Sony, it tries to keep the framing more still, and then you'd have a little bit more, every once in a while you have a little bit of a movement or a motion added in. So I guess it's kind of preference to what you like. I think the G85, it probably stabilizes a little bit better in post. If you're going to add a little bit more stabilization, you could probably get a really nice looking image. Now, moving on to the photo side, these cameras all did quite similar in performance. So 1/13th, if you take like 5 shots, for example, you'll probably have one that looks fairly good, whereas at 1/25th, about half your shots are good. And I think 1/25th is probably the sweet spot where you could take, 2-3 photos and you know that one will be good. And then if you go to 1/50th, you'll have maybe 80%, 90% usable shots if you have a steady grip. So they all performed fairly well, which is interesting because the Sony did noticeably worse on the video side, especially for the walking compared to photos. One thing that was really apparent though was the resolution difference with the Sony and also the sensor size. So the images look better, higher quality, more detailed because you have higher resolution, and because the sensor is twice as large, of course you have less impact of noise reduction, stuff like that. So overall image, I think the a6500 was the best, but the other ones, if we're just looking at stabilization, they did just as well. So it was interesting to me. I wouldn't say that the Olympus is the best image stabilization overall, at least from what I could see here. I think it does have some advantages, and one is just the form factor. It definitely has the best grip, the most ergonomic, so I felt like I was the most stable when holding it compared to the other cameras, with the Panasonic kind of being in the middle, and the Sony is definitely not good ergonomically. So let me know what you guys think from all these tests. Of course, Patreon supporters at the $10 level can download these clips and the photos and take a look and compare them for yourself. Thank you to all the Patreon supporters that allow us to spend more time and do these videos and make sure that we do them right instead of just trying to get them done and out, but going back 2, 3, 4, 5 times to redo some of these tests to make sure that they're just spot on and accurate. So thank you guys. Make sure you guys hit that subscribe button because we will be doing a full detailed review on the OMD E-M1 Mark II, which we're filming with right now. and we're going to just cover a lot of the video side. So you guys make sure you don't miss that. Hit the subscribe button and enable those notifications so YouTube doesn't filter out the videos. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.